Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Eugene Onegin. By Alexander Pushkin. Eugene Onegin is the most famous work of a Russian author named Pushkin. 5,600 verses make up the book's 8 chapters. It took Pushkin over 8 years to complete and is now regarded as one of the greatest masterpieces of Russian literature. The popularity of Russian literature in the 19th century rose as a result of this work, which shifted the focus from romanticism to realism. Many artists, including writers, were inspired by its originality. Pushkin wrote the novel Eugene Onegin in exile. Although Pushkin wrote 9 chapters of poems, some of the criticism of politics and society that is evident in the work was edited before it was released. Thus, the author, in addition to omitting, but also burning a complete chapter, did so. The work was eventually released in 8 installments. It was first published in 1825, and it was completed in 1831 and published 2 years later in its entirety. Since the fall of Napoleon until the Decembrist revolt, the novel touches on political and social changes in Russia and the rest of the world through each chapter. There are many things going on in the novel, but at the core of everything is a story of love and how it can overcome any obstacle. However, the novel's unique selling point is its abundance of realistic depictions of ordinary life. Pushkin wrote about the people, customs, and fashion of early 19th century Russia, as well as the difficulties and triumphs of daily life. As a result, the book is regarded as a veritable encyclopedia of 19th century Russian society. In order to make the story more credible, it was written at a period when it was actually taking place. Chapters can be read individually or collectively because of the book's thematic framework. Nonetheless, each theme is concluded at the end of its own chapter. Another Byron figure from Russian literature is Eugene Onegin, the novel's protagonist. In order to escape the city, he became a nobleman and moved out to the countryside. He was well educated and accustomed to idleness, but he craved love adventures most of all. This causes him to become depressed, and he begins to worry about the world's problems and society's suffering. He is unable to settle down with a lady he loves and who he can provide a comfortable family home because of his restless nature. Because of this, Eugene is eventually left to deal with his own feelings of loneliness and despair. To introduce a prototype superfluous guy, literature uses Pushkin's Eugene Onegin. This character would eventually serve as the basis for many other literary works' protagonists. The term superfluous man refers to a person who, due to socio-political changes, finds himself on the periphery of society, without character or purpose. Because of this, a man collapses, without a purpose or place in society, typically hungry and impoverished, and without a purpose for living. As a result of the novel's 14-verse stanzas, Pushkin established his own unique form of poetry, known as the Onegin stanza or the Pushkin sonnet. The book was adapted for film, opera, and music in a slew of languages. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky's opera is the most famous. It all begins with a brief description of Eugene, a little boy. Throughout the novel, he is described as he matures. He had a wide range of abilities and a deep intellect. His knowledge of history, economy, Latin and kindness to women made him a great conversationalist. As a result, he was regularly asked to various social gatherings. A lot of time was spent on his appearance and he always wore the nicest suits and perfumes. Everything in his workplace was decorated to the tiniest detail from Paris and London. Pushkin's storyteller often interjects with his or her own observations and monologues. He expresses his views and converses with the youngster. He attends a dance at the beginning of the novel. At some point during his stay we were introduced to Elvina, the girl who had his heart in the legs he couldn't shake. He didn't seem to be in a good mood at the time. There were repercussions to his lifestyle. He grew irritable, lost interest in dating, slowed down his reading, and stopped going to the library. We learned from the narrator that they were friends because they had a similar way of life. They had a good time together, but the storyteller longed to return to his native country. Despite his best efforts, Onegin was unable to join him on his voyage. When his father passed away, he left a large amount of debt in his wake. To avoid having to appear in court, Onegin basically let them take everything from him because he believed his wealthy uncle would leave him a substantial fortune. It was only after he learned that his uncle was dying that he decided to go and retrieve the money for himself. A late arrival meant that Onegin's uncle had already died, but he still had full control of the estate. After that, he started living in the country. Chapter 2. At the beginning of the novel, we learn about Onegin's village and castle. He was fed up with the drudgery of village life, so he came up with a novel solution, a new rule. Because of this, he was regarded by others as a strange individual. As the story progresses, Vladimir Lenski is introduced. When Onegin first saw him, the 18-year-old was a complete stranger to him. He was friendly and enthusiastic, and he had a lot of energy. Friendship was extremely important to him, and he longed for the day when he'd meet the one. He was not a big fan of going out much or being around a lot of people. He merely wanted to meet Onegin, and that was all. Friendship blossomed between them despite their vastly differing backgrounds. Lenski developed a crush on Olga, and Onegin overheard them talking about her. I want to talk about Tatyana first, the narrator adds as an interjection to the effect that Olga was nice, kind, shy and peaceful. Tatyana was a bookworm like her mother, and she cherished a calm existence. In the wake of her mother's second marriage, she relocated to the village where her new husband had previously lived. She enjoyed her time there, but she quickly became bored. Despite his admiration and devotion, she maintained control over her spouse. Later, he died and Lenski went to his tomb. A flashback brought back memories of his desire for him to be with Olga. Chapter 3. Tatyana and Olga are brought up again by Lenski and Onegin. After a brief conversation, Onegin agrees to accompany Lenski on his trip to see his family. Onegin was intrigued by Tatyana after their meeting and had several questions for her. Everyone in the community was speculating as to which of them would be chosen as Tatyana's husband-to-be. Tatyana contemplated them and determined that Onegin was just what she was looking for in a man. After that, the narrator gives a preview of what's to come in the book. Tatyana confides in her nanny about her emotions for Onegin, and he recounts the exchange. For the letter, she asked her to supply some paper, and she gave it to her. At the time of writing, Tatyana claimed to have fallen in love with him and that she would not have written the letter to him, even if she knew he was in the area. It was her nanny's grandson who sent her the letter, which she finished the next day. Onegin remained silent for 2 days. Olga asked Lenski about Onegin when she saw him. He promised to visit her today, saying he couldn't earlier since he was unable to because he was unable to catch up on his mail. Tatyana waited excitedly for him, and when he finally arrived, the storyteller informed us that he would resume his writing later on when he went for a stroll and got some sleep. Chapter 4. Onegin tells Tatyana that he was in love with a girl for 8 years, but that he's no longer in love with her. He also mentioned how much he enjoyed her letter and how she would make a wonderful wife if he ever got married. However, she should not feel bad about the situation, as he admitted that he had feelings for her and that he would fall in love again. While Lenski and Olga were happier, Tatyana became more depressed. They grew closer as time went on, and they even exchanged love notes. When the cold weather arrived, Onegin made the most of it by lounging around. On the day of Tatyana's name day, Lenski paid him a visit and informed him about the occasion. A visit from Onegin has been planned, and Lenski shares with him his most important secret. Olga and he will be getting married soon. Chapter 5. Tatyana savored the Russian winter and its snowfalls. In January, on the eve of her first birthday, there was snow on the ground. Tatyana's dream serves as the prologue to the 5th chapter's storyline. Her nightmare depicted Onegin murdering Lenski. For days, she was in a state of agitation because of it. Some terrible thing was about to happen, she thought. There were many attendees at Tatyana's party, including Onegin and Lenski. When Tatyana sat next to Onegin, Onegin felt awkward. Then he congratulated her on her name day, which made her feel better. Onegin vowed revenge on Lenski for putting her in this predicament in the first place. Grabbed Olga in his arms and began to dance with her while he did so. For an extended period of time, they danced together, which enraged Lenski. The chapter concludes with him returning to his house to retrieve his weapon. Chapter 6. After Onegin's retaliation, he was satisfied. Tatyana couldn't sleep because she was haunted by the images she had seen. The author once again tells us that he plans to continue the novel at a later date. It's Zaretsky's turn. Onegin pals came to visit him one morning and found him to be an honest man. In a message, he invited him to confront Lenski, and he delivered it to him. Zaretsky departs after Onegin accepts the challenge. Then Onegin comes to the conclusion that he shouldn't have gotten himself into this situation in the first place. With Onegin's assent, Lenski was shocked, and the fight would take place the following day at the mill. Both of them were on their way to the mill by the time the sun came up. A distance of 16 feet between them was required for the cannons to fire. They aimed at each other when they realized they had the distance right. Lenski was shot by Onegin because he was quicker. He was sorry, but there was nothing he could do to change it. This is how life would be with Lenski, according to the tale. In the pines near the creek, he discovers Lenski's body buried. Many people were curious in the lives of Onegin, Olga, and Tatyana as they walked past his grave. This information will be revealed to us later, according to the storyteller, who tells us that he will now begin to recount his life tale. Chapter 7. The narrator informs us that spring has finally arrived in this chapter. Olga married, Tatyana was abandoned, and Onegin vanished from the village, as we learn in this chapter. In the middle of a walk, Tatyana went to Onegin's residence, and she was moved so much that she returned the following day. When she entered the library, she found that he had written notes on the books as she browsed through them. As a result of her mother's decision, she plans to travel to Moscow and find a husband there. She bid farewell to the community with a heavy heart. Tatyana, her mother, and her aunt arrive at the home of another aunt after a long travel. Tuberculosis has been a part of her life for a long time now. Tatyana's family and friends were soon looking for a suitable match for her. Eventually, they found her general, but at first glance she didn't like him and realized she wouldn't like him. Chapter 8. That's the tale the storyteller tells us about, one that took place during his college years. He also got to see Onegin, 26-year-old man with no family and jobless. Nobody could assist him get rid of his departed friend's haunting memories. An important woman who reminded him of Tatyana was in attendance at the dance. When he inquired further, the Duke revealed that she was none other than Tatyana, his wife. Already 2 years into their union, they were a happily married couple. After dinner, they asked Onegin over to their house. When he realized that he was still in love with her, he couldn't endure her apathy any longer. He addressed a letter to her. Despite the fact that he became ill, he refused to go to the hospital at all. Onegin professed his love for her in the letter. Despite sending 2 additional letters, he never received a reply. To her surprise, he decided to pay her a visit. Before we know it, Tatyana has confessed that her mother forced her into marriage. The novel has come to a conclusion. Characters: Onegin, Lenski, Olga, Tatyana. Storyteller: Eugene Onegin. He was a well-known figure in the upper echelons of Russian society. The lack of a college education made it difficult for him to seem profound about various issues. Despite his practicality and keen eye for savings, he lacked an appreciation for the arts and literature. He slept a lot, went to dances and other events, went to the theater, and interacted with the actresses since he belonged to a certain type of society. He had a way with ladies and was very charming. He frequently played with them, and he crushed their hearts. Regardless of the cost, he got what he desired. Onegin has a horrible reputation for being a liar and a hypocrite. It wasn't uncommon for him to be grumpy and dissatisfied with his lot in life. Tatyana, beautiful and shy girl. While growing up, she was surrounded by books and spent her days in a peaceful village. Because she preferred to spend time alone, she left a lasting impression as a woman shrouded in mystery. She yearned to be loved, and when she saw Onegin, she was smitten. From that point on, she was completely obedient to him and her only desire was to see him. She was straightforward and good-hearted, but she had no prior dating experience. A letter sent by Onegin expressing her love for him was the only way she could keep her feelings to herself. A new world opened up for Onegin once she was rejected. Even though she was forced to grow up quickly, she was never angry or irritated by the experience. Despite her displeasure with the new circumstances, she eventually adjusted to them. A marriage and children were important to her, thus she wasn't willing to break her vows to her spouse. She valued her integrity and honor above all else, even her feelings for Onegin. As she grew older, she put her romantic side on hold in favor of a more grounded outlook on life. Lenski, an 18-year-old young man who was studying in Germany when he got intoxicated with the German authors Goethe and Schiller. He was bursting with energy and enthusiasm for everything around him. He was prone to temper tantrums, but he was a fan of freedom, love, and companionship. In spite of his disinterest in the people who lived in the village, he was drawn to the natural beauty and tranquility of it all. He had it all: youth, good looks, money, and the freedom to choose a wife. As a buddy, Onegin shared his experiences with him, and he found them fascinating. He was madly in love with Olga, and he was devoted to her in every way. Finally, he succumbed to his own beliefs. Olga married someone else after he was killed by his friend. Vladimir Vladimirovich Pushkin was a Russian poet, novelist, and playwright, as well as one of Russia's best-known literary figures. In 1799, he was born in Moscow. He is regarded as one of the greatest poets and writers of Russian modern literature. He was reared by a serf as a child despite being from a well-to-do family. His writing career began after his family sent him to boarding school in 1811. He was friends with numerous intellectuals, and as a result, his work benefited from their contributions. As a writer, he was severely restricted by the emperor's censorship. Pushkin's and Russian literature's most prolific years were 1828 to 1836. In 1831, he married a woman he met while working in the castle. Mozart and Salieri. A Feast in the Time of Plague. The Prisoner of Caucasus, and Eugene Onegin are some of his best-known works. In 1837, he was killed in a duel. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.